Billionaire's cruel mockery exposed. How a black janitor's son unexpectedly solved an amazing discovery that could change energy forever. Marcus's heart raced as he stood at the edge of the university's auditorium, gripping his presentation notes tightly. The grand hall loomed before him, filled with polished professionals, some eyeing their phones, others whispering about the latest business deals. But there, amidst the sea of entitlement, sat Donovan Wolfe, a billionaire whose power was as palpable as his scorn when he laughed openly at Marcus's background just days before. "What's next?" he'd sneered. "A janitor's kid saving the world?" That moment etched itself into Marcus's mind, igniting a fervor that was equal parts determination and self-doubt. Could he truly make a difference? Was he just a ghost haunting the shadowy corners of privilege? Those thoughts swirled as he remembered his father, exhausted yet proud, hunching over mops and brooms to provide for them both, a hero in an unappreciated role. That legacy resonated deep within him, fueling his resolve to pursue knowledge, even as walls of condescension surrounded him. Before he could step out into the spotlight, doubt threatened to overwhelm him. The whispers of refusal from his professors echoed in his mind, the dismissive gestures, their eyes glazing over him like he was nothing but a blip on their radar. He had come so far, yet the sting of rejection reinvigorated his insecurities. Sam had said everyone had a right to be heard, but here he stood, believing no one like him could truly be taken seriously. He had discovered something incredible: the anomaly, the breakthrough that could potentially revolutionize renewable energy usage. But who was he to challenge an industry ready to pounce? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pressure grew as Marcus recalled his late-night study sessions, his father's stories of persistence echoing in his ears, mixing with the bitterness of Wolfe's mockery. His father's voice was a reminder that resilience came from hard work, not privilege. But when faced with the thin line between ambition and survival, every second felt heavier. He had to decide whether to shy away or step forward, an easy escape or a risk worth taking. Unraveling Wolfe's unethical operations would risk everything he'd built. Even if it sowed seeds of change, would it be enough to silence the whispers of self-doubt and suffocating fear of failure? As he stood backstage, every inconsistency in his resolve clawed at him. The tension morphed into a tangible force, squeezing him. What if he was wrong? What if exposing Wolfe only put him back in the shadows? He couldn't help but glance at the booming figure seated in the crowd, the flash of a camera capturing the billionaire's smirk. Yet, as the murmurs intensified, Marcus felt the pull of his father's hard-won teachings, trembling under the weight of potential. The spotlight beckoned him onward, but guilt gnawed at his insides. In that glaring moment of uncertainty, with the room buzzing with anticipation and the walls closing in, Marcus faced the precipice of his choice. Was he ready to unveil the truth of the world, or allow fear to reclaim him? The air thickened around him, and he inhaled sharply, preparing to take a step that could change everything forever. The stakes had never felt higher. The time for his voice to be heard was now, if only he could bring himself to break through the silence. The moment his name was called, Marcus stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of the audience's gaze heavy upon him. The once comforting darkness of the backstage now felt like a suffocating shroud. He placed his notes on the podium, hands trembling, the pages quaking like the resolve within him. The whisper of disbelief fluttered in his thoughts, but he quickly squared his shoulders, drawing on the strength bubbling from the depths of his upbringing. He blinked away the cacophony of doubts flooding his mind and began to speak, his voice tethered to the echoes of his father's perseverance. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Bennett, and I stand here today not just to present findings on groundbreaking energy technology, but to challenge the existing narrative of who can contribute to innovation. The welcome sound of his own words began to dispel the unease. As he navigated through the technical aspects of his discovery, the anomaly that had emerged from his late-night experiments, Marcus noticed Wolfe shifting in his seat, eyebrows raised. Perhaps it was doubt, or perhaps a flicker of interest. Each stat he shared resonated deeper within him, bolstering his confidence as he pressed on, determined to dismantle the perception of who he was. The longer he spoke, detailing the intricacies of his work, the more he realized this was not just a professional development moment. It was a personal rebirth. He was no longer the janitor's son ridiculed for his background. He was Marcus, a scholar that had poured his entire essence into knowledge, a voice not only for himself but for all those like him. As he revealed data that illustrated the potential energy efficiency of his anomaly, the room shifted. Gasps echoed from the audience, and murmurs of intrigue replaced the cold skepticism that had previously rippled through their ranks. Marcus could feel them leaning in, their eyes wide with engagement, and that electric connection ignited a fire within him. He was not merely talking about energy. He was weaving a narrative of hope, tenacity, and the essence of human determination against the odds. But then came Wolfe's voice, slicing through the air like a dagger. "Impressive, kid. But numbers don't lie. You think these boards will listen to your hypothetical theories? This isn't to your mother's science fair." The billionaire's tone dripped with condescension, a stark reminder of the wall that still existed between what he had created and the fortress of the privileged elite. Marcus swallowed hard, his heart racing anew. Wolves are known for their cunning, but they could be outmaneuvered. Gathering his thoughts, he turned the thrust back toward Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe, the energy crisis requires solutions that are idealistic yet grounded in scientific fact, and I stand before you with that evidence." This time he was prepared to confront not just Wolfe, but also the systemic hurdles deeply ingrained in the industry. The stakes had never been higher, and in that moment, Marcus dared to lay bare not only his work but the flawed system that catered to his detractors' biases. As he finished his presentation, Marcus' heart pounded with a heady mix of triumph and trepidation. The audience was silent, perhaps contemplating the authenticity he'd presented. They had seen potential not only in the anomaly but also in the messenger delivering it. Faced with a burgeoning momentum, bubbling beneath the surface, Marcus knew the journey was far from over. Exposing this truth wouldn't guarantee acceptance, let alone change. He had stirred the pot, and now he awaited Wolfe's next move. Would the billionaire retaliate? Would he attempt to suppress this breakout talent for his own self-interests? As the room flickered back to life amid the tepid applause, Marcus felt an unfamiliar resolve cement within him. The world of energy and innovation was ready for a reckoning, not just a change in technology, but the realization that true progress was born from diverse voices rising against the silence. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, yet he could no longer stand idle in fear. He would wield his knowledge as a weapon to engage in the real battles. And with that he stepped away from the podium, readying himself for whatever challenge lay ahead. Would he seize the moment or allow Wolfe and his ilk to dictate his future? The answer shimmered in the air, electric with possibility. The seconds that followed his presentation stretched into eternity as the audience began to murmur. Their eyes danced with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, and Marcus suddenly felt the burden of their collective scrutiny more acutely than before. Their silence was a double-edged sword. It could signal interest but also disbelief. He had traded anonymity for the spotlight, and although it felt exhilarating, the fear of falling back into obscurity loomed heavily over him. He stepped down from the podium, adrenaline still coursing through his veins as he navigated through the crowd. Wolfe's gaze bore into him like a laser. The billionaire was a predator, and Marcus suddenly felt the weight of an impending confrontation. It was imperative that he didn't show weakness. The stakes had only gotten higher. As he approached the back of the hall, a woman with a notepad intercepted him. "Marcus, can I get a few quotes for an article I'm writing? Your presentation was unprecedented." Her enthusiasm gave him a momentary boost. He quickly gathered his words, knowing that leveraging media attention could tip the balance in his favor. "Sure," he responded, injecting his voice with a newfound assurance. Yet, as he answered her questions, his mind wandered back to Wolfe. The billionaire had something planned. He wouldn't let an upstart like Marcus disrupt his carefully curated empire without retaliation. The reality of the situation stirred a mix of anxiety and resolve. Marcus knew he had to prepare for the conflict ahead. It was time to double down, to transform this moment from success into something even greater. He excused himself from the impromptu interview, the adrenaline fading to something less palpable but more powerful determination. Before he headed outside, he spotted a familiar face among the crowd: Laura, a fellow researcher who had been an ally in the lab. Her demeanor resonated with support, and he felt buoyed by her presence. "Hey, that was amazing. You really put yourself out there," she said, her excitement evident. But even as she spoke, Marcus sensed the shadows of doubt lurking behind her eyes. "But do you think Wolfe will back off?" "I don't know," Marcus replied, frustration lacing his words. "But if he doesn't, then I'll have to prove him wrong. I'm not here to just make the rounds. I'm here to innovate." Their conversation sparked an idea in him, and he began to strategize. He needed to align more allies within the community who could vouch for him and support his findings. That's when his phone buzzed: a text from Jackson, a former classmate who had risen to a position within one of the foremost energy think tanks. "Marcus, we need to talk. Heard about your presentation. I have some data you might find useful." The flicker of hope ignited within him. Perhaps Jackson could provide the additional evidence needed to back his claims against the old guard led by Wolfe. Gathering momentum entailed bringing together the right forces. Hours later, sitting at his desk, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows in his dimly lit room, Marcus began to unravel his strategy. He mapped out potential collaborations, researched competitors, and explored ways to make his anomaly stand not just in theory, but in practical application. With every keystroke, he felt the stirrings of ambition fill him, a clarion call to rise above the static noise of doubt. However, the thought of Wolfe lingered like a dark cloud, and he couldn't escape the growing tension. It was clear that this would be a duel of influence where power dynamics could either solidify his success or catapult him back to where he began. As dawn approached, Marcus felt the weight of both possibility and pressure. Innovation demanded relentless courage, and he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. He couldn't be merely reactive. The time had come to face not just Wolfe but his own fears. Would he find the allies he needed to counter the elite? Or would he crumble beneath the weight of their contempt? Marcus took a deep breath, focusing on the path unfolding before him. This was the turning point he had yearned for. There would be no turning back. The delicate light of dawn filtered through Marcus's curtains, illuminating the hope clawing at the edges of his anxiety. It fueled him with urgency to confront the challenges looming on the horizon. With every moment that passed, the reality of his confrontation with Wolfe grew more tangible. He was determined not to be just another face in the crowd. He was ready to wage a war of intellect and innovation. First, he reached out to Jackson. Their relationship had always been more than just colleagues in academia. Jackson had thrived in the think tank, a noted strategist whose insights were often razor-sharp, and now was the moment to leverage that connection. With a few taps on his phone screen, Marcus arranged to meet Jackson at a local cafe known for its quiet ambience. This setting would serve as the perfect ground for dialogue that could shape his destiny. As he made his way to the cafe, his mind raced through the possibilities. Jackson's data could be vital in solidifying his findings, but he needed to acknowledge the potential for conflicting ideologies. Jackson had thrived under Wolfe's parallels. Would he truly support an alliance that could provoke conflict within their ranks? Upon arrival, Marcus scanned the cafe for Jackson and spotted him seated in a corner, surrounded by a mesmeric aura of purpose. Jackson looked up, his face breaking into a smile that spoke of camaraderie, yet masked an underlying tension. They exchanged pleasantries, but Marcus sensed an underlying current of hesitation in Jackson's demeanor. "Thanks for meeting me," Marcus started, trying to steer the air of optimism. "I really believe we have a chance to flip the narrative." "I read the presentation recap," Jackson replied, leaning closer. "It's bold, Marcus, very bold. This might just shake the foundations Wolfe has built." But Jackson's expression turned serious. "You realize this could draw lines in the sand?" He's not one to take lightly a challenge to his authority or expertise. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The gravity of the situation dawned on him. This wasn't just about personal ambition. It was a matter of redefining the power structure. "I do, but that's exactly why I need your data. Alone, I'm an anomaly. Together we could be a catalyst for change," he urged, appealing to Jackson's analytical spirit. After a moment of contemplation, Jackson nodded, the tension dissipating ever so slightly. "Okay. I can provide you some insights that may reinforce your claims. But if you're heading down this road, You need to be ready for the backlash. With a subtle determination igniting within him, Marcus felt fortified. This was more than a partnership. It was a pact to challenge the outdated paradigms that Wolfe represented. They exchanged notes, and with each line of data passed, Marcus's confidence began to morph into a strategy, a framework of solid backing against Wolfe's intimidation. Yet, under the surface, unease churned as Marcus foresaw the inevitable confrontation with Wolfe. More than just a battle of intelligence, it promised to test his resolve, exposing every fear and insecurity he'd long buried. Still, this new alliance gave him a sense of purpose. Each click of his pen rekindled hope where self-doubt once reigned. As they closed their discussion, Jackson leaned in again, seriousness returning. "Don't get too comfortable. Wolfe will retaliate. That's just his style." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of his words. He could almost envision Wolfe's chilling response, the taunting smirk that would linger as he dismissed Marcus's efforts. It was a power play, a game in which Wolfe dominated the board. Yet Marcus clenched his fists, firmly cultivating that very anger into motivation. After parting ways with Jackson, Marcus's thoughts spiraled deeper. He could not sit idle. It was time to escalate his plans. He would craft a document that outlined clear claims, substantiated by the data Jackson provided. This needed to resonate across all channels, drawing potential allies in academia and industry alike. In that moment he knew it was not just Wolfe he was up against, but the fear that had held him back for so long. As he returned home, each step more determined than the last, the foundations of his confidence solidified with the tangible framework of his plan. But just as he made his way to draft his manifesto of innovation, his phone buzzed again, displaying an unexpected message from Wolfe himself, an invitation for a private discussion. The challenge loomed larger, and with it, a new question surfaced. Could he turn this confrontation into his greatest opportunity yet? Marcus felt a jolt of adrenaline rush through him as he read the message. Wolfe's invitation was a double-edged sword, an opportunity cloaked in the guise of a showdown. How had the seasoned titan of their industry, overlaid with an aura of invincibility, taken a keen interest in him? It was almost absurdly self-assured, like a predator inviting a potential meal to its lair. He allowed himself a moment of reflection before dismissing that apprehension. Marcus was tired of second-guessing his worth. The anxiety that had traditionally blanketed his thoughts was beginning to transform. Now it settled like a weight on his shoulders, heavy but grounding. This encounter could be pivotal. It could be the moment he would carve his path through the carefully sculpted silhouette of Wolfe's empire. His fingers danced over the keyboard as he composed a straightforward acknowledgement of the meeting invite. No hesitation, no superfluous pleasantries. He pressed send and took a breath, feeling as if every nerve in his body was a taut wire ready to spark. He shifted his focus to what would come next. He had hours before their meeting, and he needed to prepare meticulously. The document he intended to draft wasn't just a presentation. It was a meticulously woven argument that challenged not only Wolfe's methodologies but the very ethos that governed their field. Every data point Jackson shared would serve as a pillar for his claims. In his study, surrounded by the artifacts of his academic life, notes scrawled on paper, stacks of books leaning precariously on each other, and graphs plastered across the wall, Marcus felt a shift in energy. He typically reveled in his solitary work, but now the silence felt oppressive against the day's intensity. As he structured his argument, he discovered pieces of himself he didn't know existed. Each argument he wrote revealed the boundless resourcefulness that had fueled his journey. His unique perspective, shaped by his upbringing and battles, was transforming into a powerful narrative. It wasn't just about the data anymore. It was about identity, resilience, and challenging the status quo. He lost track of time, lost in the momentum of his thoughts. The page filled with headers, bullet points, and vehement rebuttals, each phrase dripped with purpose. He was no longer an anomaly but a contender, and the thought invigorated him. He was ready to confront Wolfe, to present not only a challenge but a vision of what the future could hold. Just as he reached a crescendo in his drafting, the blinking red light of his message notification pulled him from his reverie. It was a news alert about an upcoming talk Wolfe was set to give. The topic: innovation and ethics. Marcus scoffed at the irony of it. Here was the man who dismissed innovation on countless occasions now set to lecture others on its importance, a lecture Marcus planned to unfurl from beneath his shadow. With an unsettling feeling of clarity, Marcus realized his work wasn't just a personal crusade. It was a dismantling of deception wrapped in charm. Wolfe's talk would act as the backdrop for their meeting, an ironic stage where Marcus would reveal the hypocrisy woven into Wolfe's narrative. As the afternoon turned into evening, the sense of inevitability settled in. The looming challenge of his interaction with Wolfe was a test he felt ready to face. Yet, gnawing at his gut was the reminder from Jackson's earlier words: preparing for backlash was crucial. Marcus needed to be ready for whatever manipulative counter-arguments Wolfe might throw at him. With his mind sharpened, he leaned back, contemplating the weight of the moment. The forthcoming discussion would prove pivotal, the true measure of his evolution from a quiet observer to an outspoken challenger of authority. But just then he received a second notification, a last-minute meeting request from Jackson. A cryptic message indicating urgent information was needed before Marcus's confrontation. Anxiety twined with curiosity. What could be so crucial? The anticipation tightened around him like a noose, leaving him wondering what new development could change everything. Marcus felt the rush of urgency as he stared at the cryptic message from Jackson. What could possibly warrant an urgent meeting just hours before his confrontation with Wolfe? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard in an internal debate. Part of him wanted to push aside distractions and keep refining his arguments, while another part, a more instinctual, restless side, sensed the possibility of a revelation that could alter everything. He glanced at the clock. Time was slipping away faster than he'd anticipated. With a decisive thrust, he shut his laptop and moved toward the door, every step amplifying the weight of uncertainty. The muffled sounds of the bustling office outside enveloped him as he made his way to Jackson's workspace. The normally tranquil air felt electrified, charged with unspoken tensions. When he entered the meeting room, Jackson stood ready, his demeanor rigid, a sharp contrast to the warmth Marcus had come to appreciate. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Jackson began, his voice steady but tense. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, impatience creeping into his tone. Jackson gestured for him to sit and leaned in, his eyes narrowing with seriousness. "We have some alarming insights. Wolfe is far more aware of your preparations than you think. His team has intercepted documents." The words landed like a blow, and Marcus felt the thrill of adrenaline wash over him again, tinged this time with dismay. "Intercepted?" he repeated incredulously. "How could they? They know you're critical of his methods. Their counter-arguments are ready. He's likely anticipating your every move," Jackson continued, urgency threading through his words. "This is going to be more than just a discussion. It's going to be a battle of wits." Marcus fought against the engulfing wave of frustration and disappointment. His meticulous strategy, crafted with painstaking care, now felt painfully vulnerable. Yet, deep within that turmoil, a flicker of determination ignited. This was not merely about countering Wolfe's rhetoric. It was about asserting his voice, his perspective. "What do we do?" Marcus asked, his mind racing through potential strategies. Jackson took a breath, visibly weighing the next words. "We can either rethink your approach, find a different angle, or you can double down. Use the data you've prepared but be ready to pivot." "Double down?" Marcus echoed, processing the suggestion. Could this be the opportunity to expose everything he had been preparing for? It wasn't just about Wolfe's hypocrisy. This meeting could redefine the entire conversation surrounding their industry. Yes, embrace the confrontation, but do it with the grace of someone who knows they have the truth on their side. You need to anticipate his traps but also prepare your narratives. Jackson's words began to cascade through Marcus's thoughts, transforming frustration into resolve. He could no longer be the passive observer of Wolfe's reality. Now he was the challenger, the disruptor. This was his moment to translate his indignation into empowerment. "I need to gather further insights, leverage the weaknesses in his narrative," Marcus decided, tone firm. "If he wants a battle, he'll get one. But I won't engage purely defensively. I'll be strategic in my assault." Jackson nodded, impressed. "That's the spirit. We need to mobilize every resource. You have the academic grounding, and if you can approach it like an investigator, you'll find the cracks. Fueled by newfound purpose, Marcus left the room with a refreshed perspective. Wolfe may play the orchestrator, but he was ready to wield not just arguments but the weight of truth and insight. As he sat back at his desk, he opened his document again, this time viewing it through a different lens. What reckoning awaited them both in the forthcoming dialogue remained uncertain, yet Marcus was striding quickly toward an awakening. The clock ticked away, each tick amplifying the anticipation of the coming confrontation. With a newfound depth of conviction, he realized that he wasn't merely fighting Wolfe, he was fighting for himself, the son of a janitor, no longer hidden in shadows. But with the stakes amplifying, what darker surprises would Wolfe still have up his sleeve? Marcus leaned over his keyboard, the remnants of Jackson's words echoing in his mind. The urgency of the moment charged the air around him as he meticulously combed through his data. Each statistic, every chart suddenly morphed into a weapon. What once served merely as supporting evidence had transformed into the means to dismantle Wolfe's carefully constructed facade. He wasn't just preparing to defend himself. He was on the verge of launching an offensive. The clatter of keyboards in the adjoining offices faded into a dull hum, replaced by the rhythmic sound of his own heartbeat. Taking a moment to breathe, he concentrated on balancing the urgency with clarity. This confrontation required more than just facts. It demanded psychological finesse. Wolfe was a seasoned player, accustomed to manipulating perceptions and narrative frames to his advantage. Marcus knew he needed to stay one step ahead. His strategy began to crystallize as he recalled stories of past confrontations where emotion had derailed competitors. Wolfe's arrogance was one chink in his armor. Marcus could exploit it. He needed to provoke Wolfe, challenge his authority, and reveal the gulf between their ideologies, all while maintaining an air of composed professionalism. Marcus envisioned himself as both the strategist and the emotional tactician, poised to draw out truths that Wolfe was desperate to keep buried. Just as he got lost in the strategic layers of his plan, his phone buzzed a notification from Jackson. "Remember, it's not just about the facts, it's how you frame them," the message read. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his mentor's words were a warning as well as encouragement. He was poised on the brink of a Cold War, one that could escalate with one careless remark. In the hours leading to the meeting, he ramped up his research. He dove deep into Wolfe's previous engagements, looking for patterns, missteps, moments of vulnerability. Each new insight fueled his resolve. He nearly laughed at the notion that he might redefine an industry dominated by whales like Wolfe, a man so engrossed in his empire that he could no longer see the small, persistent threats swirling around the fringes. As shadows lengthened outside his office window, Marcus felt more than just resolve. He felt the rush of empowerment flowing through him. He was eager to take this fight to the next level. The past few weeks had transformed him, pushing him from mere participant to contender. He recalled the long nights spent poring over research, the struggles of his upbringing, and how every setback had only been a stepping stone. This meeting would reflect not just his professional growth, but his personal evolution as a person who had grown accustomed to confronting intimidation. With the hour approaching, he gathered his materials, analysis, reports, and counter-arguments and organized them meticulously. But just before he left, a weight in his chest whispered apprehension. Was he masking the deeper fear of being dismissed again? Just another voice drowned out by the clamor of industry titans? Stepping into the meeting room felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Marcus took a moment to settle his thoughts and project confidence, but beneath it all, a tide of anxiety lurked. Memories of his father's struggles flickered through his mind, a legacy of hard work and resilience. This was no longer about winning an argument, it was a reckoning. As he prepared to face Wolfe, the twisted paths of his life brought him clarity. This was his moment to shine, his moment to reflect every hardship he had overcome deeply within the confrontation. But what raw, unsettling truths would surface when wolves grow desperate? Would the meeting merely expose Wolfe's manipulations? Or would it unveil deeper revelations that could reshape everything Marcus believed about his place in this world? He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the unpredictable storm ahead. The time had come to dismantle Wolfe's empire, but in doing so, would he discover not just his own power, but the lengths to which opponents would go to protect theirs? The room was an arena draped in subdued corporate decor, a world designed for power players. Marcus strode to the head of the table, placing his files down with deliberate care. Eyes locked on Wolfe. The older man's presence radiated a mix of disdain and curiosity, as if questioning how this young contender dared to challenge his empire. Marcus masked his apprehension beneath a facade of authority, determined to seize this moment. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Each listener embodied a potential ally or adversary. The stakes resonated louder than any clamor outside these walls. Wolfe, arms folded defensively, leaned back in his chair. The challenge was evident. Marcus sought to catalyze a reaction, and Wolfe was ready, perhaps expecting, to belittle the effort with a smirk. He got straight into the core, presenting his findings with strategic precision. The charts he had crafted highlighted discrepancies in Wolfe's prior reports, uncomfortable truths meticulously extracted from the very data Wolfe had believed reinforced his authority. Marcus sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Uncertainty flickered in some eyes, while Wolfe's remained steely, unwavering. But he pressed on, driven not just by the desire to confront but to reveal a deeper narrative. The numbers don't lie, and they illustrate a growing disparity, one that affects not just our bottom line, but the integrity of our operations. The room hummed with anticipation. Wolfe's smirk faded, replaced by a subtle tension. It was here that Marcus chose to plant his tactical seed, exploiting the man's arrogance. "You know," he added almost casually, "people don't always see the impact of decisions made at the top until they see it affecting real lives." The statement hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in personal stakes. Wolfe tilted his head, irritation etched across his features. "Are you insinuating that I don't consider the broader implications of my decisions, Marcus?" Each word dripped with condescension, a calculated move to undermine. But Marcus saw this as an opening. It was a classic projection. Wolfe believed he held all the cards. "You misinterpret my intent. My purpose here is to ensure we aren't blinded by tunnel vision, especially if the path we tread invites heavy consequences," he replied, his voice gaining firmness. Marcus recognized the pivot. It was time to stand up for those who felt voiceless in the vast gears of the corporate machine. The connection to his father's struggles pulsed through him, a reminder of the sacrifices made to pave a path forward. This wasn't merely about numbers, it was about defending a legacy. In confronting Wolfe, Marcus felt the weight of countless forgotten stories gravitate towards him. He was their voice, echoing in this high-stakes drama. And what if, he pressed further, these variances reflect not just errors, but systemic failures, not just to the company but to the people? Because therein lies the danger. The consequences extend well beyond profit margins. This is not just business, it's ethics. He could feel the energy shift. Doubt crept into the room. Wolfe's veneer of confidence cracked just enough for Marcus to see a glimpse of vulnerability beneath. The room crackled with potential, and he knew he had struck a nerve. As Marcus laid out further evidence, he felt electrified by the validation of his voice. No longer merely a janitor's son with a chip on his shoulder, he was a formidable strategist willing to hold those in power accountable. But as the confrontation escalated, Marcus felt a familiar tension rise. Would he penetrate the walls Wolfe erected around his ego? Or would this be another battle ending in defeat? The room's atmosphere thickened with uncertainty. As Marcus concluded his presentation, Wolfe leaned forward, eyes narrowing, a predator assessing its prey. The next words would lay the groundwork for a potential alliance or an outright war. "You think you can bring change without consequence?" Wolfe's voice was low-laden, with menace. Marcus's heart raced. He realized that the highest stakes weren't just a career on the line, they were his very principles. But what unexpected strategies would he have to employ to unearth Wolfe's true vulnerabilities? The fight was just beginning, and he was ready to engage. The silence in the room suffocated him, the tension palpable as Marcus's pulse quickened. Wolfe's challenge was more than a query. It was an attempt to sow doubt, testing Marcus's resolve. He could feel every gaze piercing into him, every second stretching into an eternity. The stakes had escalated, and he needed to respond with clarity and strength. "Consequences are inevitable, Wolfe," he replied, ensuring he didn't betray the tremor in his voice. "What's essential is how we choose to face them. Ignoring the potential fallout for the people affected by our decisions can lead to disastrous outcomes. This is about more than profit margins. It's about accountability. Wolfe's brow furrowed slightly, and for a moment, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. That brief vulnerability energized Marcus. It was time to seize this opening. He stepped closer, the distance between them evaporating as the line between adversary and mentor blurred. Picture the families who rely on us. Each decision connects to lives, mothers, fathers, children. These reports are not just numbers. They represent the very essence of our duty. A leader must not only chart the course, he must navigate the currents responsibly. Wolfe adjusted in his seat, crossing and uncrossing his arms, a telltale sign of bubbling irritation. Marcus relished it. Each shift indicated that he was finally making an impression. The mantle of self-proclaimed authority Wolfe wore weighed heavier now, precariously close to slipping. You think you can lecture me about responsibility? You come here with your precocious data, thinking you understand the complexities of managing a corporation the size of ours. Wolfe barked. But Marcus understood this was the very essence of his fight. It's not about understanding the intricacies of management. It's about recognizing the human element that must factor into every calculation. Leadership is about more than strategies on a whiteboard. It's about emotional intelligence, empathy, and ethical foresight. The words reverberated in the room. For the first time, there was a faint crack in Wolfe's armor, a hint of acknowledgement covertly masked by anger. Marcus had escalated this exchange into an ideological battle, one that endangered Wolfe's carefully constructed image. Behind Marcus's bold demeanor, a storm raged. He had never envisaged such a direct confrontation but had once simply dreamt of effecting change. Deep within, he grappled with feelings of inadequacy, of questioning if he was truly ready to challenge a titan of industry. However, fueled by his purpose and an unwavering belief in his vision, Marcus pushed beyond these insecurities. "You think your position intimidates me, Wolfe," Marcus said, matching his fierce gaze with Wolfe's. "But those who rely on your decisions don't have that luxury. If you're not willing to adapt, you're paving a path toward your own failure." The words hung heavily in the air, daring Wolfe to respond, to dismiss or escalate. Yet beneath the surface, Marcus felt the process of self-discovery intensify. He was transforming before the very eyes of his adversaries. Their disbelief and disapproval may have threatened his ambition, but it only fueled his resolve. With this realization, Marcus recognized a hidden strength within him. Not just the capacity to challenge convention, but also an intrinsic ability to anticipate the emotions tied to leadership struggles. Wolfe rose from his chair, towering and imposing. "You've done well to grasp the art of theatrics, but do remember," he warned, voice low and chilling. "This is not a playground for idealists." Marcus breathed in for a moment, centering himself. In that instant, a plan crystallized in his mind. He would not shy away but would confront the lingering shadows of Wolfe's authority. Perhaps it's idealism that ignites real change. Maybe that's what you fear most, being dethroned by those you deem lesser. The atmosphere sizzled with anticipation as he dared Wolfe to retaliate. But instead of recoiling, Marcus stood resolute, willing to dismantle not just the facade of Wolfe's arrogance, but also the systemic flaws that had perpetuated a corporate culture devoid of humanity. As Marcus prepared to back up his assertive stance with irrefutable proof, he sensed the scales tipping. This was not simply a confrontation. It was his nascent transformation as a leader in the making, a catalyst for change. But that transformative potential came with its own host of fears. Would he navigate the backlash and emerge victorious? Or would Wolfe's retaliation threaten the path he had forged? The answer hung in the air. A burgeoning clash between an idealist and a titan was imminent, and Marcus was primed to either ignite a revolution or witness the unraveling of his dreams. The next move would shape his journey irrevocably. Marcus's heart thudded in his chest as he stood before Wolfe, the electricity in the room crackling with tension. This was the moment he had envisioned, a true battle of ideals. The audience was not just witnessing a confrontation. They were on the brink of a paradigm shift. With conviction surging through him, Marcus knew that clarity and intention would guide him through the storm ahead. "Leadership is not measured by the seat you occupy," he began, "but by the legacy you leave behind. I refuse to accept the rhetoric of profit at all costs. The truth is, we can innovate without compromising the ethical standards we owe to the communities we serve." Wolfe's expression turned icy, But it no longer intimidated Marcus. He had shed the weight of self-doubt and unease that had clung to him for so long. He was no longer simply a janitor's son. He was Marcus Bennett, a scholar armed with the undeniable power of knowledge and purpose. He had transformed that vulnerability into a beacon of strength. As he laid out the compelling evidence that illustrated the real-world impacts of Wolfe's decisions, the tides of perception began to shift. Numbers danced before the audience's eyes, revealing stark disparities that stirred deeper reflections. The once subdued murmurs grew into an undercurrent of contemplation. Suddenly, the tension in the air was palpable, crackling with possibility. "You don't understand the complexities of running a business of this magnitude," Wolfe snapped, attempting to regain control of the discourse. "There are shareholders to consider, financial forecasts to manage." "Exactly," Marcus countered, not backing down. "But we cannot allow spreadsheets to dictate our moral compass. Those so-called complexities are excuses to hide behind. It's time for change, and change requires courage." In that moment, Marcus felt a wave of validation wash over him. The audience was alive to his message, their eyes softening as they absorbed the implications of his words. Would they dare challenge their own complacencies? Would they support the idea that businesses could and should be held accountable not just for the bottom line, but for the people and communities affected by their existence? Wolfe's facade was cracking, a sign that he underestimated the tenacity Marcus had cultivated. "You think this is about caring for individuals? This is a ruthless economy," Wolfe retorted, but the bite in his voice had lost its venom. "Caring is not a weakness. It's a pivotal strength," Marcus declared, his voice echoing off the walls. "You've built an empire, but at what cost? True resilience lies in acknowledging the human element in business, acknowledging responsibility. Empathy is not just a buzzword, it's foundational." As he continued to present his findings, he could see the impact building. The murmurs transformed into nods of understanding, shifting from skepticism to something more profound: recognition. The narrative was no longer solely about data. It was a human story, one woven into the very fabric of industry. People want to believe in the companies they support. They want to be involved in something that matters, Marcus pressed, channeling the essence of his father's legacy, the essence of resilience against adversity. "Together we can lead that belief. The anomaly I've developed can drive not just energy efficiency, but renew public faith in corporate responsibility." The room thrummed with anticipation. Marcus could sense the turning tide. Those previously indifferent glances were now curious, intrigued by the possibility of transforming what corporations stood for. Wolfe remained a statuesque figure, no longer the unassailable giant he aimed to project. In that defining moment, a ripple of realization flowed through Marcus. This wasn't merely a professional showdown, it was personal. Confronting Wolfe meant dismantling the shackles of insecurity that had held him captive for years. It was an act of profound self-empowerment, the culmination of his journey from obscurity to clarity, from doubt to confidence. "You want change that stands the test of time, Wolfe? Join me in this journey," Marcus urged, his voice steady. "Let us redefine what success looks like, not just in dollars but in dignity for our communities." Wolfe's expression shifted from disdain to contemplation, and the room quieted expectantly. Marcus held his breath, bracing for an unpredictable response. "You're bold, Marcus," Wolfe finally responded, his tone a mix of grudging respect and annoyance. "But changing an entire industry isn't as easy as you make it seem." Marcus sensed the shift. This was a crack in the armor he had aimed to expose. "Isn't easy, sir, but it is possible. And I believe that together we can make it happen." The room erupted in applause as attendees began to murmur their support, ignited by Marcus's compelling vision. As he descended from the podium, a profound calm settled within him. He had not only faced the titan of industry but had emerged as a leader in his own right. The journey had come full circle. He was his father's son, a scholar, and now a catalyst for change. With each hand that reached out to him, each smile of recognition, Marcus understood that he had truly conquered the conflict within himself. He had transformed into the embodiment of hope, a voice that mattered, capable of dismantling barriers and building bridges for others to follow. He realized that the outcome of his confrontation with Wolfe was not the point. The triumph lay in his evolution, grounded in authenticity, compassion, an unyielding commitment to making a difference. As he stepped away from the stage, an overwhelming wave of gratitude washed over him. Finally, he was ready to embrace the future, defined not by others' expectations, but by his unwavering belief in himself and the endless possibilities ahead. This was just the beginning. You need to subscribe now to witness this journey of transformation unfold further. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to amplify our message. I want to hear your profound reactions. Comment down below with your theories on what's next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. The world needs to hear stories like Marcus S., and you can help make that happen.